Today, we're going to be talking about a little game all about more specifically, mouthwashing. Mouthwashing itself is a 2024 psychological horror game made by the development studio Wrong Organ, which came out of nowhere. And lucky for this assignment, it just happens to be a walking simulator. Even though you can guess by the off-putting art style, it isn't the coziest game. More importantly, for this actual assignment, I'm going to be highlighting the only female character in the game, as she is at the core of the heartbreaking story that has left the game to resonate with so many people. You follow a group of 5 on the Tupler Space Freighter. The crew is as follows: the amazing so-called Captain Curly, the rough around the edges co-pilot Jimmy, Swansity the burly mechanic, Datsuke a last-minute ad, and finally, the woman of the hour, Anya, the nurse, medic, and psych evaluator of the ship. And as mentioned previously, the main gameplay loop is very typical of a walking simulator. Walking around, find a nice looking item, putting it in your bag for later, and then finding an accompanying area or object to use your held items on. However, there's also a little bit of light stealth and evasion, which, if I'm being completely honest, is probably my least favorite part of the game. It's quite repetitive, and a lot of the sections, there's only 2, are really drawn out in my opinion. And now with all that housekeeping out of the way, I'm gonna really tell you an abridged version of the story that really hits the important aspects of Anya's story. However, I think it's important we start at the beginning of the game's epilogue and kind of follow the actual pace of the game for a few minutes until we have all the pieces that connect and create Anya's story. So picture this. You load up the game, your shiny new game, and you're so excited to play, so obviously you hit start. You're immediately thrusted in front of the main controls of the Tuplar, with only 2 clickable options. The first one on your right is a red button covered in a protective glass that obviously you're not allowed to touch because you don't have a key. The overhead VA system tells you that there is a asteroid or a cellular body approaching about 1.9 AUs away. So naturally, the only other option you have is to go to your left and grab the main control stick. You're only given 2 options: steer right, which is directly into the celestial body, or leave. But naturally, if you leave, you can't actually leave. You're just back at the main control panel, where your only option is to go back to the joystick. With not a single other way to progress through the game, you steer right, essentially putting your space crew in direct danger of whatever is flying towards you. But obviously this was just a mistake. Now allowed to leave the control panel, you get up, go to a supply closet beside you, and find an emergency key. How lucky for you. We can finally access that red button. You sit down once again at the control panel, veer over to the button, left click, open up your inventory with the tab key, and use the emergency key. Now with the physical option to press the red button, you learn the purpose of it. Oh, and lucky you, it's to turn off the autopilot. Once again, the game only gives you the singular option to turn off the autopilot. You immediately turn around and start running through the halls of the Tupler system, but it winds in a way that isn't very natural. It resembles the Otherworld from all of the Silent Hill games, and it just doesn't feel right. And as you continue going through the halls and opening doors, you run into the mascot of the Pony Express, which I forgot to mention earlier is the company that you are freighting for. This unsettling section only ends after you're being jump scared by a now deformed version of said mascot. The game then does a sudden semi-gotcha crash moment and sends you 2 months post-crash, which introduces the jumping non-linear storyline that the rest of the game follows and really benefits from. This time jump also introduces Captain Curly, who's now seen to be a mostly limbless and skinless individual after the crash, who actually ends up being the game's surrogate mascot slash driving figure that you probably see in a lot of promotional images, trailers, and honestly, merchandise for the game. And now that the epilogue is out of the way, I hope that either whoever's watching this, be it a friend, viewer, or my professor, has an opportunity to play this game because it's just under 3 hours for most people, and it's a really brilliant story. It's very almost David Lynch, Silent Hill 2-esque. It's really a story that you have to experience by yourself for the first time. It uses the medium of video games to explain and share this wonderful story being told in ways that other art forms such as movie, TV, song, or just I guess art itself can replicate. It's truly unique. And now that I'm done doing an unpaid advertisement for Wrong Organ, let's do as the syllabus says and engage with the representation of women in this game. And let me start off by saying Anya deserves better. Not because her as a woman in a video game is a reductive or sexist representation, but because she's the one who is most directly affected by the actions of the two leading men in the game. Oh, and just to pause for a moment, I totally forgot to mention that during the time skips, you go post crash and pre crash. In pre crash, you actually get to play as Captain Curly before the horrific mangling, and post crash, you play as Jimmy, the co pilot. So sorry about that. Please forgive me. However, in the actual game, post crash, we mainly interact with Anya through Jimmy, the now de facto captain due to Curly's state. And it's really fair to say that in these initial moments of playing as Jimmy, you can tell that the stress of him being left with the duties of the captain is really getting to him. Through this, we are witness to Jimmy's snappy attitudes toward Anya as a side effect of this newfound stress, and a reoccurring gameplay mechanic is having to give painkillers to Curly because Anya is unable to complete that duty due to just the raw pain in the screams of Curly as they physically have to help Jimmy pass his medicine, as he is in no current state to swallow it himself. And trust me, you get to hear some lovely, lovely audio on a black screen whenever this happens. It is gnarly. Now, back to our queen, Anya. Throughout the game, she is seen giving many of the main tasks to the player, and accordingly praising the player whenever they complete an action as Jimmy. As alluded to earlier, Anya is also saddled with doing the ship's psych evaluations. A scene in a flash to 7 days before the crash, in which, when talking to Curly, she relents that the last evaluation she has to do this cycle is for Jimmy. And due to Jimmy's last psych eval, including mentions of sexual attraction, to the Pony Express's mascot, she seems really uncomfortable, and this leads Curly to offer to complete the psych eval for her, as Curly says, quote, "I've known him a long time. He won't try any bullshit with me." This nice psychiatric moment between the two actually ends with a memo being sent to Curly. Now regaining control of the character's legs, you pick up the memo and are immediately transported to 6 days before the crash, which leads us to the next Anya-related lore. Yippee! However, less excitingly, the Pony Express is going under. That was the news of the memo that Curly received previously. More importantly, through the perspective of Jimmy and his patented assholery, we learn that Anya is broke, she has no savings, and because of this, she'll be unable to finish her medical school, which in turn causes her to break down on the spot. After these revelations, we are transported to the post-crash timeline, where once again as Jimmy, we walk into the cockpit and hear the tail end of a conversation between Anya and Swansony, in which Anya, reluctantly be it, agrees to Swansoni's idea of how things must be going forward. Naturally, since we're playing as Jimmy, we walk up, ask Anya, "Why are you crying?" And then proceed to ask again, "Hey, have you fed Curly his pain medication?" And when she says no, I was wrapped up in something, he gets angry and berates her just a teeny bit, and then we get to witness another Curly being fed pain medication black screen with gross and gnarly noises. Yippee, woohoo! Oh my god. After this scene, we're given one last breadcrumb when we time jump for the 8th millionth time to 2 days before the crash, in which Anya is seen with the Captain Curly up really late one night. They are both staring into the ship's nighttime background. This is where Anya mentions how she does this quite often. During this chatter, she asks Curly why he thinks there are locks on the med bay, but none for the sleeping quarters. And to this, he can only really muster a guess. We cut back to post-crash timeline, and Anya has barricaded herself in the med bay with Curly. She's in there with all the painkillers, where it's implied that she might be putting Curly out of his own misery. Once again, in response, Jimmy says, "Hey, Datsuke, we gotta do something here." So he forces Datsuke to squeeze through a dislodged vent to check on Anya. However, this chapter ends with a black screen supporting text from Datsuke in which he musters out, what did you do?" And lastly, before I can really talk about Anya's representation, we have the last important scene to her story. We are transported back into Curly's body, this time a day before the crash. We find Anya in the cockpit having hidden the quote-unquote safety gun from everybody. I really think that this would be a disservice to the wonderful game to not let this reveal play itself out. It's only about like a minute of gameplay, or it's cutscene really. And once again, I hope you played the game before seeing this. If not, sorry viewer and or my professor. Okay, now that the cat is out of the bag, I can really talk about Anya's story more totally, rather than through these segmented events that you actively play the game through in. It is implied that Jimmy has sexually assaulted Anya, and this is what caused her pregnancy. This is never clearly stated, however. But I think this fact adds to the weight of this story. All the times that Jimmy was snippy towards Anya or put her down, the player now sees it through the actual lens of manipulation and abuse, rather than stress induced outbursts. It is heartbreaking to realize how smart Anya really is and how this abuse was able to take place right under the nose of Curly in this very secluded environment, which it really should be extremely hard to hide such misconduct. However, none of it really matters. As mentioned at the start of this essay, Anya is failed by two people, and no matter how many times she states that our worst moments don't define us, it is impossible to believe that Jimmy isn't. Secondly, it's really hard to believe that the original Captain Curly's inaction when dealing with Jimmy's awful actions don't define him. He allows Jimmy to continue his charade due to their long running friendship, which eventually leads to the start of the epilogue. This is seen in the climax, where Curly confronts Jimmy, and Jimmy proposes an idea of crashing the ship to save face. And Curly stands there in silence, Or in other words, Curly's inability to allows Jimmy to act on his plan. Which brings us full circle and reveals Jimmy to be the one who crashed the ship. But it really doesn't matter who grabbed the controls and steered right. At some point, Curly should have stopped Jimmy, but he didn't. Anya acts almost as a martyr in this story, to personify the result of actions allowed and perpetrated in cases of abuse. Most instances of abuse are never brought to light due to a multitude of factors, be it a wrongfully placed embarrassment, threats from the abuser, or any multitude of other factors. But in the case of our story, even after Anya overcame her instincts too, the individual that had the ability to stop the abuse refused to take responsibility. Nothing that transpires in this game is her fault, and throughout her portrayal, I believe that she did everything that she could to call out and prevent the abuse, but the systems in place around her failed her. Anya's aforementioned actions prevent her from being lumped in with other damsels in distress. She wasn't silent, she wasn't stationary, and she fought in every way except physically. And I don't think it's right to expect anyone in an abusive relationship to resort to physical violence. I also did this really lovely thing where I forgot to mention the theme of Anya being nauseated with giving Curly his pills. It isn't because she's a bad nurse, not by any standard. It's the fact that she is sick from morning sickness due to this ill conceived child. And I just think that's so heartbreaking. And I'm so angry at myself that I forgot this in the original draft of the script. Okay, now that we've had just a minuscule second to stew and all that, I think I'll wrap up with some fun facts. Anya's appearance is actually inspired by Wendy from The Shining, and this game story was developed singularly by Johanna. I'm gonna butcher this, it'll be up on screen. Kjarasian?
Johanna Kasurinen.
Johanna Kasarinen.
Nope, that's not even close, but I don't have the Swedish tongue, so I digress. The reason I bring up Johanna is because it's the first David Lynch story I've come across written from a female perspective, and I think that's super awesome because R.I.P. David Lynch. Everybody loves Twin Peaks. Like, what can I say? But yeah, I would just lastly like to thank you for watching. And if you haven't, go play Mouthwashing. Pretty please, and watch a lore video on it because no line of dialogue is meaningless, and you only realize that after you play the game and you revisit it. It's amazing. Super cool. Love it. Okay, good night. Bye. Good night, tri state area.